At InDigital, we know that public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESINet goes beyond industry standards, not only i3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
It is a new day for 911 professionals. They have gone from the most important person you will never see to the most vital piece of public safety. Truth be told, they always have been. The curtain has been pulled back, and they are sharing their stories. Welcome to Imagine Listening. Your worst day is our everyday, by Ricardo Martinez II, and narrated by myself, Ricardo Martinez II, and distributed by Beacon Audio Books, copyright 2023. That's right, everyone. Finally, I can let everyone know the rumors are true. Imagine Listening, Your Worst Day is Our Everyday is now available as an audiobook on Audible, and it's a long time coming. Very excited. Not a lot of authors get the opportunity to voice their own book, but I had the honor and privilege to do so. So thank you to Beacon Audio Books, as well as my publisher, Titled Town Publishing, for everything, but especially all of you for making the I Am 911 movement, as well as Imagine Listening, what it is today. I appreciate you all more than you know. So go ahead, head out, stream it, download it, however you consume your audiobooks. Imagine Listening is now available. If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and we are about to get started with Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader in next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to subscribers of the podcast, whether you are on Circle or, wow, I just drew a blank, or Patreon. I almost said Prepared, and that's because I have to mention them here in a minute. So, Patreon or Facebook. I wouldn't be able to do everything that I do if it wasn't for all of you, but especially all of you who are here watching, listening, supporting, and sharing. Thank you very, very much. And shout out to Prepared. Now I'm on the Prepared part. Shout out to Prepared for being a sponsor for March, a Social Media Plus sponsor. We've got information at the beginning of the episode, at the end of the episode, some very cool content that it is coming up as well. And I believe when this episode airs, I will have already done a dispatchers roundtable with them. We're going to be talking about AI and the impact on 911 and just everything that comes with it, all those different elements, this new tech for 911 that is coming in. So make sure to check that one out as well. Go back. I believe that's going to be number 39, round 39. So make sure to check that one out. And there's going to be more stuff coming from Prepared as well, as we talk about just different social media posts and content that is going out there. And if you ever have any questions or you want to look for some stuff on your own, just make sure to go to prepared911.com and you'll find everything you're looking for there. So I am back from Texas, and I was out at the Mayan Ranch for the 911 leadership training event put on by Mr. Joe Serio of the 360-degree dispatcher, and it was a phenomenal week. It was life changing. It really was. And if you are following social media and stuff, whether it be on my account or Joe Serio's account for the 360-degree dispatcher, you will see a lot of different things that are coming out. And just the whole week, it was very, very good. And I'll be talking about more of that stuff as the weeks progress. But now that we have that out of the way, I am excited for my guest today, and this is gonna be a lot of fun. We were already talking in the beginning and laughing and stuff, and I can't wait to bring her up and for all of you to meet her. So my guest today is Katie, and she is a 911 dispatcher with Rockford 911 out of Rockford, Illinois. Yo,
Hello.
yo. How
Hey,
are you doing?
I am phenomenal.
Awesome. This is excellent. And as I mentioned before already, I'm excited to have you on. You sent me a lot of information, your background and everything, and we're going to jump in.
All right.
But I want to say this really quick. When you and I were talking earlier, have you ever, do you like horror movies?
I could take them or leave them.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever watched one that's called The Town That Dreaded Sundown?
Uh-uh.
Okay, so it's an older movie based on a true story. It's out of Texas. It's not like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is based on true events, but is actually based on a serial killer from like the 50s or something, not in Texas. Um, this other movie is based in Texarkana,
Oh.
and I stayed the night there. So here's the thing. There was some guy, I don't remember what year it was, but there was a guy back in the day who ended up being in town. He wore a burlap bag over his head as a mask and had eyes cut out and just went on this complete murder spree and was never caught.
Oh,
No one
same.
ever knew no one ever knew who he was. So when I am driving down to Texas, I stayed in Texarkana, and I was talking to my sisters on the phone, and they said, "Where did you say that you're stopping again to rest and then, going the rest of the way in the morning?" And I said, "Texarkana." And they go, "Dude, why?" And I said, "Well, that's where I figured out where I was gonna stay. Why? What's the problem?" And they said, Dad's favorite movie is The Town That Dreaded Sundown, right?" And I said, "Yeah, what's your point?" And they said, "It happened in Texarkana." And I went, "Oh, hell no."
Whoopsie doodle.
Yeah. So when I got off the phone with him and I finally got to the hotel, which was late at night, I got out of my car and I remember I was looking around all over the place and I thought, okay, there's a few officers over there. I'm good to
Mm-hmm.
go. I should be
Mm-hmm.
fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's some of the stuff that I dealt with while I was going over there, which was hilarious. But I've never actually watched the movie myself. Horror movies are my most favorite genre, and
Okay.
that's one that I haven't watched yet. But now I'm going to because of that
Well, now you
experience.
have
So
to. You just kind of have to.
right, yeah, yeah, I have to and check it out, and we'll see if I drive again and stop in Texarkana.
Maybe just the next town over.
Right, yeah. It's just a few more miles. I can make it. Oh man. Well, it's an honor to have you on, and I want to hear more about your story. So let's jump right in. So how did you get started in public safety to begin with? Do you come from a family of, with a public safety background, or did you just jump right
I
in
do not.
green?
I do not. I couldn't tell you why, but ever since I was, I don't know, middle school, high school, I always was like, man, I really want to be a 911 dispatcher. I think that would be such a fun job. It'd be so cool. But I also knew that it was a lifestyle commitment.
Mhm.
And I had a lot of things I was doing. I was coaching high school dance. I have horses. I was doing a lot of things that didn't necessarily give me the time to pursue that career. So I worked in special education for a long time. And then I want to say, was it 2021? Our police department actually does what's called a Citizens Police Academy. So it's like 8 weeks, an 8-week course. You meet once a week for like 2 hours, and you kind of go over all the different facets of the police department. So we had like forensics, and we had the drug dogs, and we went on tours of all the different districts and stations. And one of the nights was 911. And of course, like I'm like counting down on my calendar, like how many days till it's 911 day. And I sat there with like the biggest smile on my face, and I was taking notes. And I was really excited about it. And they were like, oh, okay, at the end of the presentation, we're going to play some calls for you guys to listen to. And so I was like, yes. So they played these calls, and one of them, I remember once the call ended, I kind of like looked around, and everybody is just like sobbing and in tears. And I'm just sitting there like not crying. And I'm like, well, okay. So as soon as the class wrapped, I went up to the person that put it on, and I was like, hey, this solidified it for me. I know this is what I want to do. What do I need to do? And so I literally went home that night, filled out my application. It just so happens that they were starting a hiring, like one of the hiring groups that they do. And so I filled out all my stuff, and then I probably emailed this guy, like, I don't know, every week, like, hey, where are we at? What are we doing? How's this? He probably got so sick of hearing from me. But finally, like, it took a long time. You know, I went through all the testing and everything. It took from the time I sent my application in until I actually like got in there was about a year. It was a really long process. But it was that class that was like, okay, like I wasn't coaching anymore. My life had kind of changed. And so I was like, you know what? This is what I need to do. I was at a really comfortable job I really liked, but it wasn't where my heart was, and it wasn't where I knew I really wanted to be. And so when the opportunity arose, it was kind of like the universe kept like putting little things in my path. And finally I was like, okay, I hear you. I'm doing it. And I did it and haven't looked back.
What? Wow. Okay, so let's backtrack a little bit. So
yeah, I just spent
going
a
back
lot of
to
information.
yeah. So let's see. You said that it was probably like around 5th grade or so. You like when you first started. So do you remember like was there, maybe TV shows or anything like that you heard that kind of, planted that seed a little bit?
Well, I am a child of the early 90s, so I watched a lot of Rescue 911.
Yes, that was my favorite show.
Yep. I watched a lot of Rescue 911, so that probably aided in my interest. A lot of like America's Most Wanted, Unsolved Mysteries, all that kind of stuff. That the interest had always really been there. And I knew I didn't want to be an officer, but I still wanted to be in the field. And as someone who is very social and I like talking to people, it all just kind of like fit. And so forever, I would always tell my friends like, man, I just really want to I think I want to be a dispatcher. I think I want to work for 911. It just never kind of panned out. And then when it did, it did.
Holy hell. Okay. So, man, you were speaking to my heart and soul there for a moment, because those 3 main shows that I loved those shows. Those were shows that I watched almost religiously. And you mentioned Unsolved Mysteries, and the song is playing in my head right now. Yeah, exactly. That and Cops and just all of those shows that came out, and there was so much to it. The only thing is, so like when I started, that's what I had to go off as well, as basically Rescue 911. And at the end of almost every episode, dispatch got to meet their callers, but you quickly find out that's not the case, like in real life.
Nope, not at all.
Yeah, at least not all the time. There are folks who get to meet, their callers, the people that they help, right? But it's not like the show where it happens in every episode. So
no.
Oh man. So you go through you go through all that. You've got this inspiration and everything. You've got this, basically like a citizens academy that you end up attending. About around what age were you during that time?
I was 33. So I started my training when I was 34, and I was the oldest one in my training class. You definitely learn a lot differently at 34 than at 24.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I was 34.
And we are a unique breed because I can say, and probably a lot of other people as well who are listening to you tell your story would probably be the same way with some of those calls. Definitely in the beginning, like, let's do this. Like, I'm down. So when you were saying that, other people are just, kind of crying with what's going on and stuff, you are just already, let's do this.
Yep.
Like, this is what I feel. And so it immediately got into your blood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good thing. Like, I like to hear that. But also the fact that it took about a year for you to even get in there. So what was, I guess, what was everything that you were doing during that time? I mean, there's a background check. What else was
Yeah.
going on?
Yeah. So you do your initial, application pool, all that fun stuff. We had to do a background check and meet with a background investigator where they're like pulling your credit report and, did you drink in high school? That kind of stuff. You do a psych evaluation. That's something that our agency does. And that was 2 or 3 really, really, really long tests. And then you met with the psychiatrist and, they either said yes or no. Then you did your interview, and that was with, so our agency, we actually work under the fire department. So we met, it was like the fire chief and the 911 administrator, the training coordinator, some people from HR. So it was quite a panel that you had to interview with. And then,
Pretty intense.
yeah, it was. But man, I tell you what, I went to that interview, and when I tell you I walked out of that interview and I felt like the president, I was like, never felt so confident in my life. I was like, I nailed that because I wanted it so bad. I
Right.
was like,
Yeah.
this couldn't go bad because like, this is what I want to do. And I felt so good. So when I got the call, probably a month later,
Mhm.
they were like, hey, we're really interested in you. You actually ended up being our number 1 candidate. Like, are you still interested? And I was like, say less. When do you want me there?
Oh, man. So, okay. So you walk in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, well, quick question. So the academy that you were doing and everything, was it in the same center?
Yeah. So, we were supposed to get a tour of the 911 center that night, but it was being remodeled, so we didn't. That was,
Oh.
yeah. So the first time I actually saw our center was when I was there for my first day for training.
Awesome. Okay, so then that's why I was asking, because what I wanted to ask you was to paint the picture for everyone who is watching and listening. When
Okay.
you walk in, what is it that you see? Are there multiple screens? Is there multiple people working? Like, what do you see? But on top of that as well, what are you feeling as you walk in that first day?
So in our center, when you walk in, it's divided. One side is phones for call taking. We have 6 call taking positions. And then the other side is dispatch. We also house our fire dispatch there. So you've got one pod of fire dispatchers and then our pod of police dispatchers. And so you walk in and you're like, holy shit, I've never seen so many monitors in my life. Because like each call taker, you've got 1, 2, 3, like 4, and then dispatch you've got like 5 or 6. And so you're like, what did I get myself into? I'm ever gonna learn how to use any of this stuff?
Yeah.
And so you walk in, and we had done some like listening of the day shift, and our day shift is heavily veteran dispatchers, and so they were very, very knowledgeable, but also like, man, I don't have time for this newbie. Like, I got things I got to do, so it was, at first it was really overwhelming, because 1, it's so much information, and 2, you play such an important role that I felt like a really big responsibility to keep my officers safe, and I didn't want to mess things up because like it's my job to keep them safe. So I put a lot of pressure on myself that way, but it was also like exciting because I was like, okay, we're here, we're doing it, like let's do it. So
I love that. Just
yeah.
your enthusiasm, just all of it. But also to know too that there were points there when you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, and
Oh yeah.
I like to hear that as well because a lot of times, there are some folks that go in and they're just balls to the wall, ready to go, and do not show any emotion in the sense of being feeling or being overwhelmed, and they're almost kind of just, suffering in silence, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
because they want so bad to do well that they don't wanna show anything when, in fact, it kinda hinders their growth a bit,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes you don't find that out till it's too late, and it's a hard thing, so I'm glad that you said too that you felt overwhelmed a bit when you were
Yeah.
going in there. So you go in, you're having all of these different feelings and such, and you start your training. Does it start with geography? Do you start taking calls right away? I mean, I know how the process works basically, but for those who are watching and listening who don't know, and of course in every center it's
Mm-hmm.
different. So for you, what was it like for you?
So for me, we actually do 4 weeks of classroom training first
Mhm.
before we ever go down and do any hot seats or anything. So before we even went to our classroom training, our training supervisor had sent us all of our materials. So I was already like making flashcards with my 10 codes and with my UCR codes, because I wanted to be prepared.
Right.
And so we spent 4 weeks in the classroom, learning, you know, learning everything you need to know, when, once you get down there, it's all different anyway. But, doing all of our CPR training and our Nina training and things we need to know for CAD and for EMD and just all the things you need to know, in addition to learning all of your UCR codes, which was hard because there's a lot of them. Um,
Right.
yeah. So we did 4 weeks of that. And then once we graduated from class, then we would go down, and we went to shift. I actually started on nights. I was on nights for like 3 months. And then the trainer I was with got moved to days. So then I spent almost the rest of my training on days and then went back to nights for the last month and a half of my training. And so when we went down there, we spent maybe one shift kind of listening, to somebody, and then it kind of graduated to, okay, now we're going to take the calls, but they're basically telling us word for word what to say. And then it was kind of like, all right, little birdie fly, like do what you got to do. And so we always had someone monitoring all of our calls and stuff. But it was relatively quickly that they were like, all right, start picking up those non-emergency lines. All right, start picking up those 911 lines. So I remember the first time I did CPR was like so awful because I had never done it before. And we
Mhm.
had like flip cards at that point. And I got off the phone and my trainer was like, how do you think that went? And I was like, not well. I don't think it went well at all.
Well, you are always going to be your own worst critic.
Yes.
There's when I was a supervisor and trainer as well, I would tell people, like, if there was a write-up or something that I had to do with them and we were in the office, I would start to talk about the call, and they would tell me everything that they felt that they did, and I'm looking at my paper thinking, "They'd know it, yeah, that's exactly it." And I would tell them, "Look, there's nothing that I can say to you that's gonna make you feel worse than you already feel right now.
Yep.
But we're gonna keep working at this, and continue, doing stuff." But I get it. CPR is so nerve-wracking.
Hmm.
Also, if someone calls in while their child is choking, that one is a scary one too. I remember picking up a phone line and all I hear is and the mom yelling, he's choking," and I already have all the information and stuff that I need, but I'm telling her, "Don't hit him on the back."
Uh-huh.
and explaining why that it could make it worse. You know, it could get lodged more. And I remember her yelling at me saying, "You just want me to let him fucking die?" And I said, "No, I'm here to
No.
help. I'm here to help you. I'm gonna help you with the Heimlich." And EMS was actually somehow, by the grace of the good Lord, they were just around the corner. They just happened to be around the corner. And, they got there as we were starting. And, you know, they ended up getting it out and stuff. And she's like, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to say." I said, "You don't have to be sorry." I said, "In
Right.
those moments, like, you just want help, it's fine. This is why I'm here, not to take your shit, but this is why
Right.
I'm here is to help you, you know, and things were fine after that. But those types of calls are terrifying. But
Mhm.
it's our job to stay calm
Mhm.
and get them help as fast as possible.
Mhm. Yeah, luckily our agency, our response time is around 6 minutes, which is
Mhm.
really, really nice. So even if you are doing CPR, I personally haven't had a choking call yet, knock on wood. But
I way to
our
go. You just said the Q
right,
word.
right. But our EMS and fire department is really great and they have a really short response time. So that's nice for us. So you're not spending, 10, 15 minutes trying to do chest compressions with someone who's never had to do it and is panicked and
Right. So you end up going through all of that stuff in the beginning there where you're memorizing all these codes, and I can relate. I had stuff on cards as well, and I had my wife way back then. I would have her test me on all of those, and if I missed one, I would tell her start all over. Start all
Mhm,
over. And because she and she would say, "You don't wanna just keep going?" I'm like, "No, I wanna make sure I get these right and
uh-huh.
go all the way through." So, I feel
Yeah,
you. There's
I definitely showed my age in my class
Mhm.
because another girl that was in my class had made a Quizlet. Are you familiar with Quizlet?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so I also was not familiar with Quizlet, but you can go on there and she had made like basically flashcards, but like on you can do it on your iPad and you can do like math
Oh,
games and all sorts of like things. And I was like, "Oh my god, where was this when I was in college? Like this is so great." And she's like, "You seriously have never heard of this?" I'm like, "I'm 34 years old. No, I've never heard of this." But that was like a tremendous help. And then you weren't, lugging around hundreds of index cards, but I mean, I did that too. So,
oh, for sure. I mean, I had a folder just full of training shit, and I kept it
mhm.
throughout my entire
Yep.
career until I was done with dispatch and everything. But yeah, no, that would have been really cool. But also, when I was dispatching, like in the middle of that, it was 2007, and that's around the time that the first iPhone came out.
Mhm.
If so, the iPad wasn't even out yet for any apps or anything like that to come out. That is hilarious.
Yeah, I felt like the biggest grandma of all time. I was like, "Wow, didn't even know this was a thing that we had, but now I'm glad you showed it to me. Thanks."
It's like, "I'm the older dispatcher here, but I swear I'm not crusty, I swear."
Right. Right. I'm cool. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, man. So you end up going through all of that. You're starting to jump on calls and such, and what was that like for you when you first started taking phone calls? Not just 911 calls, but even the non-emergency ones. Because I remember some of the first calls that they had me take were alarm calls because they're very easy and,
Yep.
you know, the questioning is it's all repetitive, right? It's the same thing pretty much every time to the point where you almost remember the phone number
Yep.
and, it's like OnStar, you know, their first 3 numbers is the same as their second set of 3 numbers, and they always say those 3 numbers, and they'll say, "And, you know, number again," and then they give the last 4, and it's always funny how they have it. But for you, what was that like when you first started taking those phone calls?
Intimidating.
Mhm.
We were a really busy agency. On average, we take about 29 calls an hour. So we're busy.
Oh,
And
man.
yeah, myself personally, because I am so passionate about what I do and I wanted so badly to be good at it,
Mhm.
I put a lot of pressure on myself. So that, was not helpful at all, but I did. So just wanting to provide the correct answers to the public without sounding like an absolute asshole, that was, key.
Right, yeah.
Um, but you know, it's hard when someone asks one of these off the wall non-emergency questions and you're putting them on mute and you're asking your trainer like, so the very first 911 call I ever took, I was thankful that this was my first one, but it was a lockout. And our agency doesn't respond to lockouts. Our officers don't. So that was an easy one for me, but I was just like, whew, okay, we got over that. Like now I can take the next one and we're fine.
Do you remember what the next one was? Possibly like a type?
I don't. I'm sure it was something. I am like a big note writer because I again want to like make sure that I say everything right. So I had like my little post-it note for all my medical calls of like, these are the things you need to ask in this order. So I'm sure it was probably a medical call because we get those all the time. But
it's interesting how every single person does what we do a little bit differently.
Oh yeah.
But I was kind of the same as you. I had a bunch of notes and I had it on this little pad where I was flipping sheets. I'm like, okay, I know it's in here. There it is right there. No. Not during a call, but just like there would be times where I would just be practicing or I would have somebody else there and they would say, you know, what's this part? Where do you find it? And we would be quizzing each other to make sure that we were just on top of our game. And as soon as a call came in, it all ceased to exist and you're right into that call. And then when you're done with the call, you go back and you go, all right, so that one thing that we were talking about, it's over here. And they would say, how do you do that? It's like, how do I do what? Like, how do you turn it on and turn it off? And it's like, it's my job. That's what I do.
There's me that talks to the public and there's me that talks to my coworkers.
Right.
Two very different me's.
Yeah, exactly. How many people work at a time on one shift? Like how many people are on the floor at a time?
So at our agency, a fully staffed phone room would be 6 call takers. We usually have anywhere from 2 to 4 typically. And then on radio side, we have 3 people on radio. So our jurisdictions are broke down. We have the Rock River that kind of separates everything. So we have the west side and the east side. And then we have our Control 5, which is where you're running and confirming warrants. You're running names. You're doing plates. You're doing kind of all that administrative stuff to alleviate our main control channels. And then you've got your supervisor and then 2 fire dispatchers typically.
So do you have like about 10 or 15 total at a time?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
So just to compare my central dispatch where I was at, there were 3 of us on at a time for like 150,000 people in the area. and on the weekend it would be 4. And if we had like bad weather, there would be 5 of us that were on and maybe somebody working on a different phone minus the computer and stuff. But yeah, that you guys are busy area.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh man. But it's just listening to you talk about this. I love it because I can see it in your face. I mean, I can hear it in your voice, how much you love what you do. And that just jazzes me up as well. Like I love that. Now, as you know, you were talking about that first call and stuff, but what about some of your other earlier calls that you had? Do you remember them?
I mean, a lot of it was a blur because, you know, it took me, about November, December, January, February, March. Took me about 5 months to be officially signed off on phones. And then it took me a total of 13 months to be signed off on radio. So I was the last one in my class to be signed off. But when people tell you like, it'll click, it really does. It really just one day I was just like, oh, this is okay. But I remember the call that solidified me getting signed off on phones. It was for one of our clinics here in Rockford, and the lady had called and there was an armed subject. And I, to this day, couldn't tell you like where it came from, but I was just like spitting out questions and getting information and what was he wearing? What did he look like? Where did he go? Is everyone safe? What kind of gun was it? What did it look like? It just like rapid fire, these things came out, and then the call ended. And my trainer came over and she was like, "That's it, you're signed off." And I was like, "What?" She's like, "You handled that call better than even I would have handled it." So, and I was like, "Okay." And then after that, it
Damn.
was smooth sailing, but it just, I don't know.
So that is kind of what I call dialed in. You were dialed in, and
Yeah.
a lot of people that I've spoken to, and I feel kind of the same way for, myself. I feel like it takes about 2.5 years to get to have a moment like that where you feel like you're fully dialed in. Not that you're not, but there's a lot of stuff that you have to learn. And
Mm-hmm.
and even with being, that being said, you're always learning stuff throughout your entire career, but there's a moment, whether it be a call like you just mentioned, or something that happened in dispatch or whichever, that you feel dialed in. Sometimes it almost takes to possibly 2.5 3 years, but for the most part, 2.5 years, you're dialed in, and you have a moment like that,
Mm-hmm.
and you're ready to go. And sometimes you might even feel like, I don't know, I'm still not sure, but your trainer will end up saying kind of like that, no, you're good. You're ready to go.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it was. It just like rapid fire came out of me and I got all the information I needed. I don't know where it came from, but I was like, all right, let's do this.
Hell yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Those are some of those best moments, and from a trainer's point of view as well. When you see that happen,
Mm-hmm.
it's this is gonna sound nerdy, but it's almost like it's your child.
Yeah,
You're, oh,
absolutely.
they've made it. They're there. They're at that moment. It's just a moment of satisfaction when you see
Mhm.
someone else get it. When you see them, that they're dialed in, they have that moment. You're just kind of pat yourself on the back. You're like, "We did this together. Like this is awesome. You're in. Here we go."
Yep. Yeah, it definitely, she was like, "Yep, you handled that like a pro, like you've been taking calls for years." And I was like, I feel good. I feel like I have been. So it was a cool thing.
Well, and even more so because you have been doing this for about 18 months now?
Yep. Yep. I'm
Man.
still a baby in most dispatch eyes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, that's a for those who are watching and listening, that's a term that a lot of us
yeah.
use, is a
Yeah.
baby dispatcher. You're either a baby dispatcher, you're a seasoned dispatcher, or if you've been there way long, sometimes you get a little crusty.
Yep.
Not that you're not good at what you do, you've been there for a while, and you're just kinda set in your ways.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
Oh, man. That's funny. So what about, on the other end, because again, you've been there 18 months now, and I'm sure you've dealt with this, too. But what about a call that, kinda sticks with you?
So any call that involves elderly women, particularly elderly people,
Mhm.
but elderly women really bother me because they remind me a lot of my mom.
Mm.
And so whenever I take a call for someone who, and 9 times out of 10, it's like they're lonely, or they're having a lot of like mental health issues, and they tell you that like no one comes to see them anymore. Or I had one lady, she was 92, and she called me and said that she had taken all of her medication um because she was lonely. She was lonely and didn't want to do it anymore. And I was just like, it broke my heart, because I just imagine, you know, how she must be feeling. And then in my mind, I immediately think of like my mom, and my mom had had some health stuff, and I know she had gone through a really bad depression with all of her health stuff, and it just rips my heart out every time. So those are hard for me. Kid calls are always really hard. I thankfully I haven't had to take any super traumatic kid calls yet, but even kid calls that are calling in domestics with their parents, that's tough, because you think about how those kids have to turn around and go to school the next day, and
Right.
carry on like nothing's going on at home. So that's tough. I think I'm just like freakishly good at compartmentalization, and I just like, I don't know, I shove it away somewhere and keep it moving.
I think one of the hard things about this profession is the fact that we're all empaths. So
Mm-hmm.
as for those who are watching and listening, I know I have said this many, many times, and we are over 530 episodes now, over a decade of sharing powerful 911 stories. And I will continue to say this all the time. It's the fact that we put ourselves in the shoes of our callers so that we
Oh,
can relate. And there are a lot of calls. I'm a firm believer that there are calls that we take that are meant for us to take.
mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is because we might have some sort of experience that our partners don't have. Not to say that they wouldn't do a good job, they would probably do an excellent job, but they don't have that same experience that we have to be able to relate to that caller for whatever incident, specifics, anything that is going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you're talking, you're kind of picturing, your mom and everything, and that makes you a little more, um, more so compassionate. Not
Mm-hmm.
again, not that others wouldn't, but you have that connection.
Mm-hmm.
There's more of a connection there with that caller, which also builds that rapport for them to trust you even more. Because how
Yep.
odd is it the profession that we're in, the job that we do, that you have someone who calls a perfect stranger and they're trusting your voice, and your
Yep.
voice can literally change their world.
That's a lot of power.
Hmm. It's it's an amazing thing, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's there's all of these things that we've talked about, and all these years that I've been doing this. All of it just continues. Like I analyze it, and that's why we connect so much, because we're empaths, and
Mm-hmm.
we're right there with them from the beginning till the time that someone gets there. And sometimes with some of those calls, they actually end up coming full circle and you find out more. And hopefully a lot of people, when they're taking these phone calls, they end up getting that closure, because that's something that we don't get. Not all the
Mm-hmm.
time. It's rare that we do.
Yeah, rarely.
And cherish those moments when you get that gift of closure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What a profession, huh?
Right? Gotta be a little
So
crazy to do this job. Just a little bit.
right, yeah, exactly. A little Cheshire cat style.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Absolutely.
What does he say? We're all mad here,
Mm-hmm.
as I'm maniacally laughing over here too.
Yep.
Oh man, but I think even with that, that it takes a unique person. It's that, even as you were explaining it, you don't know what it was, but you always wanted to do it. There was just something inside you. And a
Yes.
lot of us have this calling and we don't realize it until we're in the thick of it. And then we have those moments, just like you were saying that you had, and you're like, this is where I'm meant to be.
Yep. Absolutely.
So I want to talk, it's been awesome to have you on here and learn more about you and everything. And we've discovered so much, and how you got into this, how you felt
Mm-hmm.
about it. And I want to talk a little bit about, some of the stuff because we're kind of segueing into this about the public and everything. What are
Mm-hmm.
some of the things, that you've done or that you've seen with the public, or whichever, some of the things that you want them to know?
Yeah. So, well, we had kind of touched on it. Like the big joke is that dispatchers are just secretaries.
Right. Yeah.
All we do is just like take calls and take messages. But I don't think people understand kind of the brevity of what we do. We are the first responder. Police wouldn't be going to the scene without us. Ambulances wouldn't be going to the scene without us. And it's our job to make sure that we get accurate information in milliseconds so that we can get help where it needs to go. And I think sometimes the public forgets about that. They just think that they can call us and we magically have all the answers, and everything's fine. But there's a lot that goes into it. And my hope is that the public takes a step back and sees us for what we are. We're not just secretaries, but we're actually an integral part of first responders.
What are some of the things that, as you mentioned, that that they should see that goes into what it is that we do on a daily basis? What are some of those things individually?
I mean, something as simple as figuring out where your caller is. That's the most important part. I got to have an address to send you help. So the people that call and just say, send the police here and hang up really fast, that creates more work for us. To make sure you get an accurate location. Even just information gathering, it's really important. Like, scene safety is super important for our officers. Our number one job is to keep our officers safe. And so if I'm not asking the right questions and getting the right information, I could be sending my officers into a really dangerous situation. And I don't want to do that.
Right.
If I don't get the right information, someone may be having a medical emergency that I don't get them help in time. So just the importance of accurate information gathering would be a big one, I guess. That and we're also human. Like, it's very easy for our callers to call us and be very upset and unload on us, forgetting that we're people too, and we're not just someone that you can unload on, even though they do. But I think that they sometimes forget that, like, we're people too, and we've got things going on as well. And we may have just taken a call for someone that was deceased, and then we have to hop right into, now you're calling because somebody hit your car. It's so dynamic, and I think people kind of forget about that too.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a big part of that as well that I still tell people this. Even so, this July will be 11 years since I've been out of dispatch, but I'm like over 22 years in public safety as a whole. And people would tell me, well, if they're calling and they just say, get them out here, and what is going on and what's going on, isn't that fine? And it's, no, like, I need you to stay in the
No, it's
line.
not fine at all.
Right. I said, but you could be calling me from a cell phone
Mm-hmm.
and tell me to get somebody out there, and you hang up. How am I going to send someone to you? What if I can't get you back on the line? What if you're calling from a phone that only has service to be able to call 911 and I can't get an address for you?
Mm-hmm.
I need that information. How am I going to get someone to you? Well, you guys can't just find us. No, this isn't TV. Like,
Right.
this is not a movie. This
Right.
isn't The Call. Like, we can't we can't find you like that. It's not, I mean, there's more technology and everything, right? But what if that technology, for some reason, there's a blip, anything
Right.
can happen. There's so many different variables. Anything can happen, where even the best technology can sometimes have something where there's some sort of blip or glitch.
Yep.
And then we don't have that information. Know where you're at. No, or at least some landmarks, man, or a
Right.
cross street
Give
or
me a
something.
store or a restaurant or something.
Right. Because it could be very possible that if you're in an area that one of us works in, or an officer or someone who's responding, they'll know where you're at because they know
Yep.
that area.
Yep.
So, remember those landmarks, those pieces and such. But yeah, that's definitely a big one to have the public understand. But also, like you were saying, there's a lot of calls that come in. And I remember telling people, and I learned this early on, that if you are just straight up with people, they will be better with you on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I would straight up tell them, look, your emergency isn't the only emergency that's going on. And that, hold on. For those who are listening, I wasn't just being a dick or anything like that. This is after they're yelling at me and screaming to just get somebody there, because basically they're the only ones that are having an emergency. And I would say, the officer is not just around the corner waiting for something to happen. There are
Mhm.
emergencies going on. 911 doesn't stop. Your emergency isn't the only one. And we have tons of calls coming in, and we're trying to get you help as fast as possible. So I understand you're living your nightmare, but we're trying to help you. So you need to help me as well by answering these questions.
Yep.
Another thing for people to know, the amount of questions that we are asking you does not delay the time of
No.
people going out there. There's already people going out. We just have to make sure that we have as much information as possible for the best response so that, one or two fire trucks need to go out or one or more officers need, whichever. We just
Mhm.
need to make sure we have that amount of information that we need.
Mhm. Yeah, we're never just asking questions to ask questions. There's always a method behind the madness.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest things, especially when you hear stuff on the news. People are always saying, I don't know why they're asking me all of these questions. Why does it matter if this person has a weapon? It matters.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if someone has a weapon, I'm probably going to send more than 2 officers. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm probably going to have a sergeant on scene as well.
Exactly. I remember taking a phone call once that it started out as a medical. And then at the very end, when we were getting ready to get off the phone, and I had asked questions upon questions and different ways where what they told me at the end
Huh?
would have been something that they would have said earlier. They just didn't, they weren't saying it. And at the end, they said, I think this person's suicidal too. And I went, why didn't you say that in the
Why
beginning?
didn't
I
you lead
asked.
with that?
Right, like, I asked you about that with weapons and all the stuff way in the beginning of the call. Not that the
Mhm.
call was that long, but either way,
Right.
if that's right in the beginning, that's a completely different response than a
Absolutely.
medical. Now we've got EMS who has to stage
Yep.
and, all this other stuff that has to happen, and the person was I remember the girl, she goes, "I just, it was an afterthought." Like, "Okay,
Okay.
and this is your boyfriend that you're talking about? Okay." So, yeah, there's a lot of different variables, a lot of different factors that go into this profession, but even with all of that, and especially hearing you talk about it, it's rewarding.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot that is rewarding. There's a lot of horrific in 911, right? But there's a lot of things that are rewarding as well, and there's a lot of good moments, and sometimes we don't always celebrate those moments,
Mhm.
and we need to normalize that. We need to celebrate those moments. I always talk about journaling and saying to write your wins down because when you're having a hard day, you can go back to those wins, and you've got your why, and it's why you do what you do.
Mhm. Absolutely.
So, we were also talking about some myths. What are
Mhm.
some myths that you know of that you wanna put out there that you wanna squash?
Um, oh boy. Well, for us,
Mhm.
um, when people say, like, they call 911 and they say, well, it's not an emergency, but I tried calling the non-emergency line and nobody answered. Well, that's because we're on 911 lines. There's only so many call takers and we answer both of them. So
Right, yeah.
we got to answer 911 lines first. So I mean, I don't know if that would be a myth per se, but or I've had people call and they were like, "Well, I wasn't sure if you guys were going to be open." And I'm like, "We're open all the time.
That
All the
is
time.
yes. Yep, that is one right there, and we
We always have someone here."
yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
We would joke and so not with the callers, but once we got off the phone, we would say, "Yep, we are here 24/7, 365, weekends, holidays, and forced overtime."
Yes. Yeah. Even when we don't want to be here, we're still here.
Right, yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, there are a lot of different, different myths that one of those things that we were talking about just a little while ago, location. That's
Mhm.
a myth right there that people think that because, different companies with apps, whether it be like a DoorDash or something like that, can find you, pinpoint you, or whichever, that 911 can do the same thing. And it's not the same because there are privacy issues.
Mhm. Yep. I mean, just trying to trace a phone call. First of all, you have to have probable cause to even trace a call. You know, it has to be an actual emergency. But then
Yep.
depending on what carrier you're trying to get information from, you're printing out paperwork, filling out paperwork, sending it back to them. Then they have to call and verify you. Like, it's a whole process, that it's not just this instantaneous, like, let me plot you on a map kind of thing at all. It's not that at all.
So I, now that you say that, there's something popped into my head. I remember having to call one of the carriers. I won't say who it was, but I remember I had to call the carrier to try to get a location for someone that we were looking for. And the person goes, I need to have a real officer contact me for this information. And I said, oh, really? And they said, yeah, we need like a sergeant or someone who's in charge. And I said, okay, well, I'm the supervisor on duty for dispatch. And if you want to be the reason that this person ends up potentially dying because we can't find them, then that's going to be on you. And the person goes, what's your phone number so I can get the information? Or what's the phone number so I can get the information? I was like, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Because it's true.
I'm not just calling for fun. I'm not trying to just keep you busy. Like,
right.
There's a reason.
Right. Yeah. It's like, we all have a job to do and this person's life is on the line. So do you want to be the reason? And that person did not want that on their conscience.
I bet they never made that mistake again.
Probably not. No, probably not. But it's stuff like that, man. You know, sometimes there are things like that that you have to do. Luckily, you know, again, as I was saying, the technology is way better now. And I think that type of technology also helps with the mental health and wellness aspect of what it is that, you know, that we do every single day in dispatch, because before that technology, there would be someone who would call on a phone that you can't call back. And they're, you know, let's just say in a kind of like a state game area in the woods, and you can't find them. You've exhausted all your resources. Unless they call back, there's nothing you can do. So then you, being the person who takes that call, leaves your shift and it sticks with you.
Yep.
I wonder whatever happened to that person.
Yep.
It can be haunting.
Yes.
Man. What are some other myths that you can think of that you want to squash for anybody in the public who might call?
I mean, sort of dispatch related in the sense of everyone thinks that the officers just like hang out at the station, and so that they can just call us and be like, I'm at this station, can you send an officer out? And I'm like, no, because all the officers in that area are out on calls and they're out on the road. So no, I can't just have one come out of the building and meet you.
Yeah, that does not happen. I mean, it does sometimes, right? Sometimes there'll be someone there who's doing paperwork, or it's usually someone who's either just coming on the shift or just leaving their shift, that someone's there, and you call over there like, wait, what? Like, somebody's waiting outside. Can you just talk to them really quick? And a lot of times too, it'll turn into an actual complaint. They're like,
every time
over the radio, like, Central, can you give me a complaint number for, you know, such and such? And you're like, oh.
You're like, and you thought you were going home. Here's a report for you.
Yep. But yeah, a lot of times that doesn't happen. And the lockouts, like you're talking, you know, that could possibly be a myth too. Either lockouts or that officers give people rides home.
Yes.
It happens sometimes, but the majority of the time it doesn't happen. What sucks though is after you've told someone on the phone, no, they don't do that. They're not, you know, like a taxi service or anything. They don't just give rides home. And then you end up hearing the officer come over the radio say, Central starting mileage, you know, somebody walked up, I'm gonna give them a ride home. You're like, damn it. Like,
yep. You're like, I already talked to them. Told them
it's like we just told them that you guys don't do that. A lot of times though, from the times that I remember, they knew each other. Like they were buddies or something. So they were giving them a ride home. But otherwise, you know, people would call in and like, I'm sorry. It's like, they don't do that.
Yes.
They don't do it.
I bet we take too many of those calls on a shift. I'm like, I don't know who told you that they're going to do this, but like, no.
I blame TV.
Yeah,
Television.
absolutely.
Television. Yeah. That it happens there. People see it. And like I said, sometimes it does happen. And when it does, I'm like, okay, good. The person, depending on where you're at, whether if you're like you're in Illinois, so it snows there. So if somebody gets a ride, you're like, good. I'm glad that they ended up getting a ride, But it's those folks who call in all the time who like they know, like they're trying to, get something. Those are the folks that you just think, come on. Like, what can you do, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So as we go into the wrap up of this episode, which has been awesome to have you on, it doesn't even feel like it's been as long as it's been.
It doesn't.
This has been a lot of fun to talk to you, just to hear your enthusiasm and just your motivation. I mean, it's inspiring that you're really into it as much as you are, and I love that, and I can't wait to see. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I can't wait to see or even hear, to continue to hear how your journey continues on, because this is an awesome profession, and I'm just glad that you are a part of the Thin Gold line. So thank you for what it is that you do.
Thank you.
So a couple of questions here as we go into the wrap up. One, for anyone who is thinking about or might be on the fence of joining the Thin Gold line, someone wanting to come into the profession, what is some advice that you might have for them?
Let's see here. Kiss all of your holidays and birthdays goodbye. All your free time. No, I would say it's in my opinion, it's something you have to have a passion for. And so if you even remotely are interested and you kind of feel the draw, go for it. Go for it. Challenge yourself. I will say that this job has been the most challenging career I've ever had. There was a lot of times during my 13 months of training that I was like, man, am I cut out for this? Like, can I do this? It's hard. It's really hard. But when you reach that finish line and you get signed off and, they let the baby bird fly, it's really awesome because you are doing such a service to the community and people don't even realize it.
Right. It's being a part of something that's bigger than yourself.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Now you've got 18 months in, and even with these 18 months, if you could go back in time with the knowledge that you have now to talk to yourself 18 months ago, or even to talk to yourself around 5th grade when you were saying that you wanted to do this, what would you tell yourself?
Do it sooner. I am thankful for the work experience that I had before coming into dispatch, because especially working in special education, I worked with students with autism. That really, really has helped me with a lot of our callers. If whether it be a parent calling in because they have a child with autism who is having a behavioral episode, or we've got mental health callers that call very frequently. I feel very comfortable handling that kind of stuff because I already have a base knowledge of what's going on. So I'm very thankful that I have that work experience. But 35-year-old Katie wishes that I would have jumped into this career, at 22 when I graduated college. I just wish I would have done it sooner.
Awesome. That is perfect. Thank you so much for what you do and for being on. This has been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will be right back here with you in just one moment. And for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you ever want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is WilliamTomTomPodcast@gmail.com. Yes, I just went into phonetics at that moment. And whether you are new to the profession, you are seasoned, or you are retired, I would love to have you on the podcast to share your story. I've been doing this for over a decade, and it's what I love to do. So please send me a message, or you can simply go to links links.co/WTT podcast, and that's links with 2 I's.co/WTT podcast. You'll find everything there. My email, all of my social media, where to follow. You can listen to the latest episode. If you scroll down just a little bit more, that is where you'll find the button that says where to schedule an episode. There's also information on there for, I believe, about 300 hours worth of free, that's right, free continuing education for 911 professionals. These are from all of the virtual events that I have put on, but also with the podcast, there's also 500 plus hours worth of powerful 911 dispatch stories. So there's so much information that you can find there. There's also a spot for the Imagine Listening book where you can purchase, where you can pre-order the second book that launches August 4th of 2024, and the spot for the online store for dispatch and podcast merch. You can find it all, once again, at links with 2 I's.co/WTT podcast. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, as well as X and LinkedIn and Insta, basically all the platforms. You can see this. And you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. And a big shout out, as always, to In Digital, Leader Next Gen Core Services, for being a podcast sponsor, and then Prepared as well for being a Social Media Plus sponsor for the month of March. Make sure to stay tuned to the end of this episode to hear more information about them. And if you're looking for anything else, you can check them out at prepared911.com. Have a good one, everyone, and we will see you all in the next one.
You just listened to a Code 7 Network podcast. If you have any questions or would like to be a guest on the show, send an email to WTTpodcast@gmail.com.